call this one the late morning drip. Because, yes, I am lazy today. But that is okay. We are still probably going to have this up earlier than the Tuesday or the Monday version, which we recorded early, but it didn't get up until afternoon due to press conference things and whatever. Nonetheless, we're back talking a little bit of Michigan football things. Very excited still. I want to address one thing in particular that I've been seeing a lot coming out of course, is a lot of the Michigan fan base who are very jaded, and it makes sense that there would be. There's a little bit of PTSD there. You've seen Michigan beat up on bad teams only to go forward and lose to the bigger teams. There's a couple things that come from this. Number one, I say, why don't you just enjoy a big win? Because I think that's important, right? It was not only a big win in the sense of the score differential, but Michigan did everything it was supposed to. And I see a lot of people saying, but it is just Western Michigan. Okay, but if they looked bad against Western Michigan, then it would count a whole lot, right? Last year, Michigan wasn't getting a lot of wins against anybody. So I think you have to take the good with the good, right? It's one of those things where, hey, the team looks sharp in all facets. It's not it. I wouldn't say, all right, bring on Ohio State. I don't think that that's what anyone is saying right now. But I think that people are saying, okay, Cade McNamara looked really sharp, going 9 for 11. Blake Corum looked really sharp, getting 200-something yards in all-purpose running. I think that you look at the fact that you have all these other things that were going really well. The running game in general getting 330-something yards. The fact that there was only 4 missed passes in the entire game. I think that that's, again, something that bodes very well. That's between two quarterbacks. The fact that the defense held its end of the bargain, right? That there weren't a lot of coverage breaks and things of that nature. I think you got to take a lot of that good and say, all right, at least it looks good now, right? It's something to build on, because if they looked absolutely awful, then who knows what would be happening going into this Washington game this week, which I still think is going to be a challenging game regardless, especially because they did lose this past week. I think that, Jim Harbaugh went on 97.1, I read earlier today, and he talked about Washington has had this game circled as their biggest game of the year regardless. So they're going to get their best shot, of course. I mean, Washington's getting to town a couple of days early. They're going to practice at 8 p.m. Thursday and Friday to prepare for that 8 p.m. kickoff here, getting acclimated to the time change, all of those things. They're taking this game very, very seriously. But of course, Michigan needs to win that game in order to move forward, and certainly that same crowd will say, well, Washington isn't any good. They lost to Montana. You have to take the good with the good, you know? And there is also a take a good with the bad and all of that, but I think specifically when something is good, accept it. You can't sit there and downplay what Michigan did in the sense of that was the team on their schedule. And Western Michigan is not a bad team by any stretch. So it's actually been a pretty good team, the second most veteran team that Michigan will face all season, Rutgers being the most veteran. So that's that's a quality group, especially you look at the line play on the offense for Western Michigan. It's a lot of veteran players. They had some really good veteran receivers. There's a lot that Michigan did really well against some guys who know how to know how to do some things because they've been around for a minute. It kind of takes me to that adage. I remember talking to Dalen Baldwin back after he committed to Michigan, and I said, "Are you worried about facing Big Ten defensive backs, considering that you've been playing in the FCS level?" And he said, "No, football is football, right? They put on their helmets, they tie their cleats on, they do all the same things that I do. No, I'm not concerned with that. So you have to keep that in mind. Again, with the disclaimer, I am not saying that you should take this game and say, all right, well, we're winning in Madison for the first time since 2001, and Ohio State, your number has been called. We have a long season, but at least the guys are saying exactly the right things. exactly what you want to hear in the situation where they look back, and unlike Minnesota, where they seemed like, as Donovan Jeter said earlier this year, that they were feeling themselves. Now they're not doing that. They look back, they think back to last year. Some of them say, yeah, we aren't looking back, with others say, no, we use that past as a reminder of where things can go wrong, because they remember Michigan State team losing to Rutgers only to come to the Big House and ended up upsetting them. So by no means is anyone taking a look at this and saying, all right, season's made. But again, you have to take the good with the good, because Western Michigan is who was scheduled. Michigan handled Western Michigan in impressive fashion. It was, as I said repeatedly during the game, quietly impressive. And I mean, it added up and looked very impressive by the end of the game, but it was just stacking good plays upon good plays throughout the entire game. So we're going to need to continue to see it. I understand there's still certainly that show me crowd that wants to see it continue. Michigan's going to have to continue to prove it, because we have seen moments where Michigan, all the way back in the Rich Rod era, and Michigan looks really good in non-conference only to get to conference play and then be terrible. But again, no one's saying, all right, well, this is it. They're clearly one of the Big Ten front runners. All we're saying is things looks really good. Now, of course, I have to address, because I didn't get to on yesterday's morning drip because it wasn't officially announced, but Ronnie Bell being out for the season, it's just such a huge blow. I've said over and over, I said it again a couple times yesterday, that I looked at him as a Chris Olave-like talent, even though people weren't discussing him in that same breath. I felt like we were finally really starting to see that in the game against Western. So it's a huge blow. The good thing is, while you might not necessarily replace his leadership, you do certainly have other players in the wide receivers room. This is probably the one position group where you can afford to lose, who I would call your best player, because there's just so much talent just kind of that has been biding its time, waiting its turn. I'm really looking at AJ Henning and saying it's your turn now, because I think that he is not necessarily the same exact type of player, but I think he brings a similar type of skill set. He can be a guy that can get you a lot of yards after catch. He's got the speed. He can find ways to get open. He's very dynamic of a playmaker. I think that he's the one that you want to take a look at and say, all right, it's your turn to step up. Obviously, you also have Robin Wilson, his fellow 2020 classmate, that could certainly play a big factor. Or if you really want to dig deeper, you could go to Andrell Anthony and Christian Dixon. But I still think that they have options there. So it's not a all is lost situation, but it doesn't make it any less of a absolute bummer, to lose a team captain, a guy who was a 3-star that I remember when he committed and people complaining, but a guy that just turns things around. So it's hard to not feel awful for Ronnie, and you hope that he gets better really, really soon. And obviously, he's going to have that season-ending surgery here before too long. But nonetheless, that's where we're at in the morning. It feels like we've got a long ways to go before Washington comes to town, but it will be here before you know it. We are in the season. Anyway, thank you for joining me on this late morning drip. It's still morning. It's just late morning. We'll see you tomorrow on Wednesday.